What's up, guys? It's Lil Creepy, and welcome back to the channel. When you're out in the wilderness, help can be miles away, and sometimes you're not as alone as you think you are. These 3 stories demonstrate that, so without further ado, get comfortable, let's get into it. The ranger didn't ask where I'd been camping. He didn't ask if I'd been alone. He didn't ask what I'd seen. He listened to everything I said without interrupting, then looked me dead in the eyes and asked one question. Did you whistle back? 3 years ago, I decided to spend a weekend alone in a remote section of the Appalachian Mountains. It wasn't an official campground, just a backcountry trail where dispersed camping was allowed. The ranger told me that the nearest road was more than 8 miles away. You probably won't see another camper all weekend. I remember smiling, because that was exactly what I wanted. The hike was beautiful. Towering pines blocked most of the afternoon sun, turning the trail into long stretches of cool shade. A narrow creek followed me for most of the hike, and every now and then squirrels scattered through the leaves ahead of me. It felt untouched, peaceful. By late afternoon, I found a small clearing beside the creek and pitched my tent. Dinner was simple, a small fire, instant coffee, one of those freeze-dried camping meals. As the sun disappeared behind the trees, the forest slowly changed. The birds stopped, then the wind. Even the creek seemed quieter. Not silent, just wrong. Like every sound that remained had suddenly become careful. I ignored that feeling and crawled into my tent around 10. Sleep came quickly. Then, 3 soft whistles drifted through the darkness. I opened my eyes. 2:13 a.m. The sound came again. Not loud, not close. Far enough away that I couldn't judge the direction. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't the wind. It sounded deliberate, like somebody trying to get somebody else's attention without shouting. I waited. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I convinced myself another camper must have been somewhere deeper in the woods, so I fell asleep again. The next morning, I walked nearly half a mile in every direction. No tents, no fire rings, no evidence of any other campers. I told myself whoever I'd heard had probably packed up before sunrise. By afternoon, I'd almost forgotten all about it. That was until sunset. The birds disappeared earlier than before. The woods became unnaturally still. Even the insects stopped. When darkness settled over the clearing, I found myself checking my watch. 2:12. 1 minute earlier than the night before. The whistle came back. The exact same 3 notes. Only this time, it answered itself. One whistle from somewhere ahead of camp, another from far behind me. Like 2 people speaking across the trees. I stood frozen outside my tent, flashlight in one hand, a balled up fist in the other. But neither whistle came again. I laughed nervously, mostly to convince myself that I wasn't scared. Then, without thinking, I whistled the same 3 notes back. It was silent. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then, the whistle answered me. Directly behind me. Close enough that I felt my shoulders lock. I spun around with the flashlight. There was nothing there, just trees. The beam of light swept across dozens of trunks. No movement, no person, no animal, only darkness. I climbed into my tent and zipped it shut. For the first time, I locked the zipper pulls together. I don't know why. It just suddenly felt important. Morning finally came. I stepped outside expecting to laugh at myself, but instead, I found footprints, fresh ones, leading straight towards my campsite. Relieved, I followed them. 20 yards, 30. Then they just ended. No leaves covering them, no rocks, just gone. As if whoever made them had taken one final step and then ceased to exist. I searched for nearly half an hour. Nothing. No campsite, no broken branches, no sign that anyone had ever been there. That's when I noticed something else. The birds still weren't back. Not one bird. That evening, I decided I was leaving at sunrise. I wasn't panicking, I just had a bad feeling. The one that you can't explain. I kept the fire burning longer than usual. But around midnight, I realized something that made my stomach tighten. The smoke from the fire was rising completely straight. Not because there was no wind, but because the air wasn't moving at all. The force felt sealed. At exactly 2:13, the whistle returned, but this time it wasn't trying to get my attention. It was trying to imitate me. I heard my own cough, then the sound of my camping chair creaking, then my breathing, slow and steady, outside my tent. I stopped breathing altogether, but the sound outside didn't. Footsteps slowly circling my tent. One complete lap, then another. Every few seconds they'd stop, as though whoever was outside was listening, waiting for me to move, waiting for me to make a sound. I gripped the flashlight so tightly my hand cramped. The footsteps stopped right next to my head. The fabric of the tent slowly pushed inward, only slightly, like someone was resting a hand on it. Then, 3 soft whistles, less than 2 feet away. I ripped open the zipper of my tent, and I quickly beamed the flashlight into the darkness. But there was nothing. The clearing was empty. The fire still burned. The trees never moved, but someone had been there. I know it, because the side of my tent was still bent inward, slowly returning back to normal. Needless to say, I didn't sleep after that. Before dawn, I stuffed everything into my backpack without even bothering to fold the tent. The hike out felt completely different. Every turn, the trail looked unfamiliar. Every shadow seemed too dark. About 2 miles from the ranger station, I stopped to catch my breath. Hands on my knees, I bent over, just breathing. I looked at my footprints, stretched behind me through the muddy section of trail, perfectly clear. But I noticed there was something off about my own footprints. It was like I was taking double steps in the exact same spot. Each footprint had a separate print directly inside of it, the exact same size as my feet. Same direction, same stride. Every footprint I left contained another footprint placed so perfectly inside my own that I'd never notice unless you looked closely. Someone was walking directly behind me, placing each foot exactly where mine had landed. Not just on the way out, but on the way in. The edges of those prints were older. They dried before mine, which meant one impossible thing. Whoever had been following me had already been on that trail, waiting, matching every step I took before I ever reached my camp. I ran the rest of the way back to the ranger station. When I arrived there, I found the ranger and I told him everything. The whistles, the silence, the footsteps, the footprints. He never interrupted. He sat there stoically, waiting for me to finish my story. When I was done, he asked, "Did you whistle back?" I nodded my head in response. He closed his eyes and then he quietly said, "That's how it knows you're alone." I asked him what it was. He shook his head. We don't know. We only know the pattern. It whistles. If someone answers, it gets closer. I asked if anyone had ever found whoever was making the sounds. He stared out towards the forest for so long, I thought he hadn't heard me. But finally he answered, no, because the people who go looking for the whistler never come back. I asked why the trail had looked so empty, if something followed me the entire time. He looked at me for a moment before he spoke. Then he said something I'll remember for the rest of my life. You keep saying it followed you. What makes you so sure that it wasn't leading you? I've never gone back to that part of the Appalachians. I still camp, but never alone, and never where there isn't another campsite within sight. Sometimes, though, I'll wake up around 2:13 in the morning for no reason. The house is quiet, the neighborhood is asleep, and for just a second, I'll hear 3 faint whistles drifting through the darkness outside. I never answered again, because now I know that I wish I didn't. Whatever was out there didn't start whistling when it found me. It started because I was already found. The strangest thing about that camping trip wasn't that something was moving our campsite. It was that whatever was doing it was careful. It never broke anything, never stole anything, never hurt us. It just kept moving our things, a few feet at a time, like it was trying to get us somewhere. And by the time we realized where it was leading us, we were already too close. Every October, my 3 friends and I would disappear into the Montana wilderness for a few days. It was something we had done for almost a decade. We weren't inexperienced campers. We knew how to handle bad weather. We had dealt with bears near camp, freezing rain, and nights where the wind shook our tents so hard that we barely slept. But nothing had prepared us for what happened in that forest. It was Tyler, Evan, Mason, and I. That year, Tyler found a remote area on an old topographic map, a section of national forest so far away from civilization that the nearest established campground was almost 15 miles away. It was exactly what we wanted. No crowds, no noise, just wilderness. After nearly 6 hours of hiking, we reached a small clearing surrounded by massive pine trees. The strange thing was how perfect it looked. The clearing was almost completely circular. Soft grass covered the ground. Large boulders sat around the edges, and an old fire ring rested in the center. It looked like someone had been camping there for years, even though none of the maps showed an official site. At the time, we thought we had found the perfect spot. Looking back, I think we should have kept walking. The first night was completely normal. We cooked dinner, sat around the fire, told the same stories we had told hundreds of times before. Nothing strange happened. The next morning, Tyler walked out of his tent and immediately stopped. "Did one of you guys move my chair?" His folding chair was sitting about 10 feet away from where he had left it. We joked that he must have moved it himself and forgotten. It was weird, but not scary. Not yet. That afternoon, we went fishing at a nearby river. When we returned, something was different. Our cooler had moved. It was no longer beside the fire. It was sitting underneath the pine tree about 20 feet away. Still closed, nothing missing, no damage, just moved. We searched around the camp looking for tracks. There were none. Tyler laughed and said one of us must have been messing around. Nobody admitted it, because nobody had. The next morning, we stopped making so many jokes. Our firewood had been rearranged. Every log had been stacked by size. Smallest pieces at the bottom, and the largest pieces on top. Perfectly organized. It looked less like someone had moved firewood, and more like someone had been practicing, taking their time, making sure every piece was exactly where they wanted it. Tyler decided we needed proof. He pulled 2 trail cameras from his pack. We pointed one towards the campsite and one towards the tree line. If someone were coming into camp, we would know. We tested both cameras before leaving and they worked perfectly. That evening, we came back and immediately checked the footage. There were hundreds of pictures, but no people, no animals, no movement. The cameras had recorded the entire day, but somehow captured absolutely nothing. Then, Evan noticed something. The chairs, all 4 of them had been moved. But this time they weren't scattered around camp, they were lined up together, facing the woods, like someone had arranged them to watch something. Nobody said anything, because suddenly we all had the same thought. Something had been at our campsite, and it wanted us to know that it was there. That night, I woke up around 4:30 in the morning. At first, I didn't know why, but then I heard it. Footsteps, slow and heavy, walking around the tent. I stayed completely still. The footsteps stopped directly outside my tent. I knew whatever it was so close, but I couldn't hear any breathing. I didn't hear much of anything outside the footsteps. It was eerily quiet, but I didn't hear it move away. I knew it was there. I mustered up the courage and grabbed my flashlight. I waited for a second, then I unzipped the tent and looked outside. There was nothing there. The campsite was empty. The chairs were still facing the woods. The fire was almost dead, but the forest was completely silent. It was so unnaturally quiet that I could hear my own heartbeat. I stayed awake until morning. When the sun came up, Evan was the first person outside. A few seconds later, he called our names, but not loudly, just enough to make us immediately know something was wrong. "You guys need to see this." We stepped outside, and at first everything looked normal. Then Tyler noticed the tents. They weren't where we had placed them. Not far, only a few feet, but enough. The distance between the tents had changed. The fire pit wasn't in the center anymore. The boulder we had used as a table was further away. I pulled out my phone and looked at the pictures I'd taken when we arrived. The difference was obvious. The entire campsite had shifted. We tried to explain it away. Maybe we remembered wrong. Maybe the ground was uneven. Maybe the photos were misleading in some way. Then Tyler checked the GPS waypoint from when we first arrived. He stared at the screen with a puzzling look on his face. Then he looked up. We are not in the same spot. When we arrived, he had put a waypoint directly on our campsite so we wouldn't lose it. When he showed us that waypoint, it was over 100 feet away. Our phones weren't wrong. The signal wasn't drifting. The campsite had just been moved. But so was the clearing that we'd set up in. The trees, the boulders, the fire pit. Everything had moved. All the evidence pointed to there being some kind of technical error, but we could not figure out for the life of us what had happened. After a short conversation, we noticed something even stranger. The movement wasn't random. Every night, everything had shifted in the same direction. The chair, the cooler, the firewood, the tents, everything had slowly moved north, toward the edge of the clearing, towards a thick wall of brush that we hadn't paid much attention to. At that point, we didn't care why it was happening. We packed our gear. We were leaving. As we pulled up the last stakes from our tents, Mason suddenly stopped. He was staring at the ground. We all traced his eyes to see where he was looking. The grass beneath the campsite looked strange, flattened or compressed. like something heavy had been sitting there. We started looking around and we noticed there were circles, perfect rings pressed into the earth, all throughout the clearing. These rings formed a distinguished path that led off into the woods, in the same direction that everything had been shifting. None of us could explain why, but we all felt an unnatural urge to follow the path. So we did. The path led through this tiny hole in that wall of brush that was on the north side of the campsite. Only about 20 yards into the brush, the ground dropped away from under our feet. Hidden beneath the branches and overgrown vines was an old mine entrance. Rusting rails disappeared into the darkness down the path. Rotten wooden supports leaned against the walls. It was abandoned and forgotten. Based on where our campsite had been moving, we would have been sleeping almost directly above it. And then simultaneously, we all came to our senses and broke the trance that we were in. We left immediately. No questions, no discussion. We hiked out faster than we ever had before. Just as we were about to be out of the forest, we saw an old man, by himself, walking directly towards where we had just come from. He stopped us and asked why we were so frantic. We did our best to explain what had happened. When we were done, he asked, "Did anything get damaged?" "No," we said. "Did anything go missing?" "No." He nodded his head, told us wait 1 second. He took off his pack and reached inside, and he pulled out this old black and white photograph. It showed a group of miners standing outside the mine that we had just come from. He handed it to us. He said that the mine had collapsed in 1948. 23 miners had been inside. None had survived. He said the locals used to tell stories about that place. What kind of stories, we asked. He hesitated. That the miners never wanted anyone near the entrance. We asked him what he meant. He looked at us, and he said something that surprised all of us. "It seems like whatever is down there was just trying to show you." It's now years later. I still don't know exactly what to make of it. Maybe it was the miners, maybe it was something else. But I always come back to one detail. Whatever was moving our things had 3 nights to hurt us. It could have done anything, but it didn't. It moved our campsite slowly and carefully towards the mine. There's still one question I can't answer. Why was it moving our things so methodically, so secretive? Like it was trying to lure us in there without us even knowing? And what was that trance-like state that we all got put into after we saw the circles on the ground? I tried researching the mine to see if I can find out more information, but there's no public record that that mine ever existed. Like it was swept under the rug, gaslighting us as if it never happened. But we know it did. The strangest thing about the wilderness is that it never looks dangerous when you first arrive. That's the trick. During the day, the forest feels welcoming. Sunlight cuts through the trees, the wind moves gently through the branches, birds call from somewhere above you. Everything feels alive, peaceful, and safe. But when the sun goes down, the forest changes. The same trees that looked beautiful hours earlier suddenly feel like walls. Every shadow seems deeper, every sound seems closer, and eventually you start wondering if you're really alone, because the wilderness has a way of hiding things that have been there for long before you arrived, and sometimes the person warning you about the danger is the only reason you survive it. This happened when I was 16 years old. My father and I used to take 1 backpacking trips every summer. Nothing extreme or dangerous, just a few days away from everything. No phones, no traffic, no distractions, just the two of us walking through the woods. My dad loved places that felt untouched. He always said that there was something important about seeing the world without anything that humans had built around it. I remember him saying, most people spend their entire lives surrounded by things that we created. It's good to remember that the world existed before we got here. At the time, I thought it was comforting. Looking back at it now, I think he was right. But I think he underestimated how small we really are out there. That summer, we chose a remote section of the Pacific Northwest, a place known for its massive old-growth forest, forgotten logging roads, and trails that could go days without seeing any other people. It was the kind of place where you could walk for hours and never hear another human voice. On the second day of our trip, we came across a man sitting beside a small fire. At first, we barely noticed him. He was tucked away just off the trail. An older man, maybe late 60s, gray beard, worn green jacket, a backpack resting beside him. But something about him immediately felt strange. Not threatening, just weird. Because he didn't look like someone camping. He looked like somebody waiting. His fire was completely burned out. There was no tent, no cooking gear, no visible food, no extra supplies. Just him, sitting there, watching the trail. As we got closer, he looked up. He smiled, but he didn't say hello. He just stared. My dad, being polite, nodded. He said, "Afternoon." The man didn't respond right away. He looked at my dad, then me, then past us, into the forest behind us. Finally, he spoke. "You're staying farther down the trail?" My dad nodded. "Yeah, about another mile." The man's expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. A slight tightening around his eyes, a look of concern. Then he shook his head. "You shouldn't." My dad gave a small laugh. "Why's that?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he looked deeper into the trees, like he was listening for something. Then he quietly said, "Don't stay here after dark." And that was it. No explanation, no warning. He simply turned back towards his dying fire, and the conversation was over. My dad thought it was strange, but he wasn't worried. He figured the guy was just another unusual person you sometimes meet while hiking. Someone who had spent too much time alone in the woods. I wanted to believe that too, but I couldn't shake the way he looked at us. It wasn't like he was trying to scare us. It was worse. He looked scared for us. About an hour after our interaction with that strange man, we found our campsite. And honestly, it was perfect. A small clearing beside a lake, flat ground, fresh water, a beautiful view. Exactly the kind of place you hope to find after a long day of hiking. As we set up our tents, my dad brought up the old man again. Probably just trying to mess with us. I laughed. Maybe he was right. But something in the back of my mind kept replaying those words. "Don't stay here after dark." That night, everything felt normal at first. We cooked dinner, sat beside the fire, and talked for hours. Kind of night that makes you remember why you go camping in the first place. Then, around 9 p.m., we heard something. A branch snapping, then another. Someone walking, slowly through the trees. My dad immediately stopped talking. He grabbed his flashlight. He called out, "Hello?" No answer. The footsteps stopped though. We waited. After a few seconds, my dad relaxed. Probably a deer. Then, a voice came from the darkness. "Leave." My entire body froze, because I recognized the voice. It was the old man, standing between the trees. Except something was wrong. He wasn't carrying a flashlight. He wasn't carrying a backpack, and somehow, we never heard him walk up. My dad stood up. "How did you get here?" The man ignored the question. His eyes moved around our campsite, scanning the trees, like he was looking for something. Then quietly he said, "You need to leave before they notice you're here." I felt my stomach drop. I yelled out, "Who?" The old man looked directly at me, and for the first time, I saw a genuine look of fear on his face. Not concern, not nervousness, but fear. Then he turned around and walked into the darkness, disappearing behind the shadows. We didn't sleep much that night, and as soon as the sun came up, we packed up and left. We didn't even speak of it. We both just knew we had to leave. We left everything behind as quickly as we could. On the way back, we passed another group of hikers. My dad stopped them. "Did you see the older man camping nearby?" They looked confused. "What older man?" "The guy wearing the green jacket," my dad said. The group exchanged looks. One of them shook his head. "There hasn't been anybody out here." My dad forced a laugh. "No, we definitely saw him." The hiker stared at us, then asked, "What did he look like?" My dad described him. Gray beard, green jacket, old backpack. The man's expression changed. Finally, he said, "That's impossible." My dad frowned. "Why?" The hiker pulled up his phone and showed us an article. A missing persons report. The picture was the man that we saw. Same face, same beard, same jacket. The headline read, "Local hiker missing for 36 years after disappearing on a backcountry trail." I remember staring at that picture, waiting for somebody to laugh and say we were being pranked. Waiting for somebody to say it was just a big coincidence. But nobody did. We got back to civilization. We went straight to the ranger station. My dad showed the ranger the article. The ranger looked at the picture, and then he looked at us, and the first thing he said was, "You saw him?" My dad slowly nodded. He leaned back in his chair, and for several seconds he didn't speak. Then he said, "I was hoping that story had finally stopped." The ranger explained that every few years, hikers report seeing the man, always in the same area, always warning people, never asking for help, never staying for too long, and always saying the same thing: "Don't stay here after dark." The ranger opened an old cabinet and pulled out a folder. Inside were handwritten reports, dozens of them. Different years, different hikers. Same description. Same man, same warning. I asked him, if people keep seeing him, why hasn't anyone found him? The ranger looked at me and said, "They did." I waited, but he continued. "They found his campsite. His backpack was there. His supplies were there. His footprints led into the forest. And then they just stopped. As if the man just disappeared, or was picked up by something much larger than him." Years have passed since that trip, and I've thought about that man many times. Not because he looked frightening, because he didn't. Not because he threatened us, he never did. The thing that bothers me is that he wasn't trying to hurt us. He was trying to save us, or warn us. And whatever he was protecting us from had been there long before we ever entered the woods. A few years ago, I looked up that trail again. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe I wanted proof that what happened was just some strange coincidence. Instead, I found another story. A group of hikers had disappeared near that same lake. Search teams found their campsite. Their tents were still standing. Their food was untouched. Their belongings were exactly how they had left them. But carved into the wooden table beside the fire, there was a message, and it read, I tried to warn them. Underneath the message was a name, the same name from the missing persons report, the camper who vanished 36 years earlier, the man that my father and I had saw. I've never gone back into that forest. I don't know what happened to those hikers. I don't know who that man really was. Maybe a ghost, or maybe he was something else. But I know one thing. If you're in the deep wilderness and someone tells you should leave, you listen to them. Because sometimes the thing warning you isn't the thing you should fear. Sometimes it's the only thing standing between you and whatever's waiting for you in the dark. If you guys enjoyed the video today, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'm new to YouTube, so if you guys have any suggestions, drop them in the comments below. Hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Good night.